Well, welcome. Thank you all so much for taking the time to join us this evening. I know it's absolutely beautiful outside and you're here, so I thank you for that. We'd also like to acknowledge that we are gathering on the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa and Shuswap people. My name is Jill Jutai, and I'm the Executive Director of Golden Community Social Services Co-op. The co-op is entering our third year of serving the community. We've been tasked with taking on some complex community challenges, such as poverty reduction and affordable housing. As part of our housing work, we've put together this speaker event to ignite our imaginations, engage our housing champions, and spark informed community conversations. We hope that tonight's lineup will get us thinking about housing challenges and opportunities in Golden and Area A, and help us move some of our ideas into actions. This evening would not have been possible without the generous financial support of the Columbia Basin Trust and the Golden and District Community Foundation. The speakers this evening have volunteered their time to participate in the event, and we are grateful for them sharing their time and energy with us.
So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about the planning implications of affordable housing and some potential opportunities that we can find through good planning. I think some of the things to remember first off is that there's no easy solution. A lot of the times we want to fix the affordable housing problem as quickly as we can, but it just takes time to build houses. And it is a bit of a long view plan. It involves a combination of tools, so it's not just one thing that's going to fix the problem. That being said, there are some things that the community can do, but there's also some things that you as individuals or members of the community can do to help achieve affordable housing as well. So some of the key concepts from a planning perspective are providing a diversity of density and different housing options. Not everyone needs a single-family house throughout their entire lives. Some people need apartments when they're younger, and then they grow into bigger places, and then as they age, they may want a different place. So just having those places available in town is a really key goal. In order to do that, having flexible zoning bylaws and appropriate regulations that allow you to build these diverse housing types is also really important. And I think there should be some emphasis on looking long term at these things. Sometimes building as quickly and as cheaply as possible, it solves an immediate problem, but when you look at it with a long-term lens, you find yourself back in the same position again, 20 or 30 years down the road. So, we want local buy-in. We want people to appreciate different types of affordable housing, and so thinking about sense of place and community character as we're providing these places is also really important. So first off, when we hear density, I don't know if you can see this, but this is a giant tower in the mountains. I think when we hear density, often it can be a scary word for a lot of people. We think a giant tower in the mountains, or maybe it's an apartment building down the road that you've looked at for 10 years that you think is kind of ugly. But density doesn't have to be scary. There are a lot of places that do density well, and these are the places that people love to go and visit. So there are good examples of density, and not just in Europe. We have them here in North America too. So one of the key planning concepts that's kind of been a focus recently is this idea of the missing middle housing. In Golden, similar to Revelstoke, where I am, we have a lot of single-family housing. But this idea of missing middle starts to address those different types of units that people need. So duplexes and triplexes and townhouses, live-work units. These are all providing that diversity that we need in the community. So some of these are carriage cottages or laneway houses. Golden's on a grid system with alleys. So there's an opportunity to incorporate these into your local zoning bylaws, into your official community plan. to allow for this. So what this does is it provides, another unit on a single family piece of property. It might be fit for a young couple or a single person, young family, something like that. The image on the right is a house across the street from me, and I live in I'm currently renting in a single family residential neighborhood, but this is actually a triplex, and you wouldn't really know it to look at it. So, integrating these different kinds of housing into single family neighborhoods is a way to kind of gently increase density without, having to build a giant apartment or something like that. One of the more interesting concepts that I've seen recently is called pocket neighborhoods. So this is where you have a bigger piece of property and you design several smaller cottage-type apartments around a green space. Typically, they're a little bit smaller than a single-family home. They tend to have centralized parking, so you can kind of see parking's all in this area, and you walk to your smaller places. And I think in terms of the quality of place, this would be a really great place to live. Some of the higher density options are courtyard apartments. So if you're in Banff, they have some pretty good examples of these. One of my favorites is this one, Moose Corner. Again, designed to look like houses, maybe not appropriate right in a single family neighborhood, but on the edge where you might have a transportation corridor or something like this. Again, just a nice way to do density that's not the typical kind of ugly apartment. Apartment houses are another one, again, just designed to look like a single family house from the street. They're really long. They tend to take up a bit more lot. And some of the houses that I've talked about, like the apartment house and the courtyard apartment from the previous slide, these are all doable with your existing zoning bylaw. I had a look through today, and you've got an R4 zone, which is kind of your highest density residential district, and you might have to adjust a few things to get to this level of density, but these are all fairly achievable in Golden right now, which is great. Townhouses, again, they can look really good, provide more of a bigger unit for families, but still achieve a higher density. And again, your R4 zone can accommodate this here. Another interesting one is a live-work unit. So this is the idea that some people need office space, and rather than having a home and an office, you can combine both. So the image down below here is showing a photography studio where someone can work and live upstairs. And if their living situation changes and their family grows, and they decide they don't need that studio space on the ground floor, this can be converted into housing. So this is a space that kind of grows with your needs. And the last one I'll talk about is one I just came across actually earlier this week, and it's called a side hustle house. And it's the idea that this house is designed to accommodate changing family needs. And it's designed in a way that you can add pieces on as you need more space. So this can be a garage, it can be an office, it can be a family room or a dining room or something like that. So, and it can be configured in different ways so that not everything looks the same, which again gets to that sense of community character that you want to be building. I thought I'd talk about some real life examples too, and how I mentioned it's not just one solution that's going to solve the housing issues. It's often building multiple good things into a community that's going to help with that. So I'll just look quickly at how certain areas have combined a bunch of strategies to achieve affordable housing. So this is Bainbridge Island. It's just outside Seattle. I was lucky enough to visit there last spring. This is a housing cooperative. It started with a bunch of people sitting around a table drinking wine one night, and they said, we want a place where we can live. It's based on environmental values. So, as a cooperative, they decided what they wanted their neighborhood to be about. Some of the considerations they've given for affordability was this solar panel financing option. So it was an option where they'd help you purchase solar panels for your house. And you could start producing your own energy, and then all of a sudden you're not spending money on utilities and things like this. They thought they'd get about 50% buy-in, and they actually got 100%. So that that was a really successful thing that they built into their design. They also, rather than building a basement, they have a storage shed. That's number 2. Number 3, community gardens. And number 4 was an interesting one. It was a kind of detached pod that could be used, again, either as as an office or as a guest suite when people's parents came. It could be rented out by different members of the community. And so, all these things help with affordability. They also integrated some apartments and townhouses. So again, thinking about different needs for different families. So the upper units, the upper 2 floors were 2-story townhouses for families. This was perpetually affordable housing. So that was again built into the co-op. They wanted to have units that could only be used for rental housing. And the lower parts were apartments, and the lack of a yard or anything they tried to accommodate with some communal green space. And this next slide is what it looks like. And it's actually, to me, it would be a really great place to live too. The last concept that I'll talk about is it's called agrarian urbanism, which is a bit of a technical term, but it's essentially a community that's designed around food production, becoming more self-sustaining, affordability through local food production. The idea is that your lot size is based on your level of commitment to food production. So the more food you're going to produce, the bigger your lot. And they've taken this from large-scale farms all the way up to apartments. They've even looked at how apartments can produce food. So this is kind of a Canadian example. This is the design for Tsawwassen. It's about 10 years old now, and last I checked, they've just started selling units in the community. And again, this is just showing really quickly how they allotted land based on food production. And the next slide is just talking about what kind of food production people are, going to contribute to the community overall. So even though you're in an apartment, you're still going to contribute some food from balcony gardens, and as you get into lower density, obviously the food production. And this is a community that's really embraced that model. This is in Switzerland, and you can see what a community that's focused on sharing and doing things for the community in terms of food production looks like. So, to wrap it up, how can you personally help work towards affordability for Golden? The first one is I would really advocate getting involved with the community planning processes. So, the town of Golden needs to know that there's a demand for these things. So, if you want laneway houses or you want different kinds of housing that aren't currently permitted in the zoning bylaw, and getting involved with the official community plan, if that's updated, or zoning is a good way. Reducing parking requirements is another big one. Parking takes up, one space takes up about 350 square feet of space overall. So the more parking spaces you need, the more land you have to dedicate to parking. So if you can reduce that, you know, it helps bring down the cost of those places. You know, if you have the means, you can help by actually building these different kinds of housing. So there's a movement called small scale or incremental developers, and it's really about you recognizing that there is a need for these different housing types and actually getting out there and building it. There's all kinds of resources that'll help you do that. And the last one, which I believe Glenn is going to talk about next, is starting a housing co-op. And I've actually just personally got involved in something similar in Revelstoke, not a co-op necessarily, but a co-land purchase for the purpose of developing. So if you want to ask me about that during the Q&A, I'm happy to talk a little bit about kind of where we're at with that and some of the challenges that have already arisen despite it only being about a month or two. So some of the resources, as I mentioned, small scale developer, there's tons of toolkits that help you break down costs and get a sense of, you know, whether that's an option for you financially. And finally, I just want to touch on this idea of long-term thinking. You know, as I mentioned, building as quickly and cheaply as possible does solve an immediate problem. And, you know, I think affordable housing is an issue in a lot of communities throughout BC. But I do think it is important to think about the kinds of places you're creating. So, you know, getting the character right and building places that people are going to want to live in and maintain and be proud of for 100 years is a lot different than building something that's only designed to last for 20 years. So I guess my mantra is if you're going to do it, let's do it right from the start. So, thanks very much.
Tonight you're going to hear from Ned Johnson, I hope, who's going to talk about his rental housing project proposed downtown. You're also going to hear from my old friend Rav Sumal, who's hiding somewhere now. There he is. Hey, Rav. About a strata type building that he's building down on 5th. I also want to talk a little bit about co-ops and just give you a big picture with not many details of what you can expect if you're going to set up some kind of housing project. Whether it's affordable or your typical housing project, doesn't matter. The same legal constructs you're going to have to deal with. For instance, typically an apartment building or a strata development starts out as a single developer who stratas the building. Each of the units in the building becomes individually owned, just like a single family house is individually owned. That's a very significant legal concept. It was a big thing when it came in the 60s and 70s. Very, very common now, and I think there's probably nobody in this room who doesn't know what a strata is. The notion of how to get to strata, however, is important because a single developer like Rav and his family can create the project and then sell the units. A group of people can get together as partners or in a corporation and build a building and sell the units. Or a much larger group like a municipality or a nonprofit group can get together the funds and the land and the construction and then sell the units. That's a very typical and common way of developing land. You develop the project, you sell off the strata units. Another way is to develop the project, whether it's a corporation, whether it's a group of people that got together in one form or another, whether it's a nonprofit group or a municipality. Another way would be simply to create the project and then rent out the units. And Ned, I hope, will tell us more about how that model would look. That's how Bill Banks started with the building down by Spirit Square. It was meant for rentals, and for years and years and years he rented the units out. Then as he got older and realized he didn't really want to maintain them as much, he decided to strata the building and sell the units off. So they're not mutually exclusive. You can do rentals first and then switch to sales if you wish. And I guess the thing here is to try to think outside the box in terms of what you want to do. Now, so far, I've only talked about private ownership. There is a process very common. In Golden, for instance, we have the units, the subsidized housing units down on Fisher at the end of 5th that are run by a nonprofit group, owned by a nonprofit group, subsidized by the province of British Columbia, so that the rents there are based on the person's income. If you have a very limited income, you pay a lower rent, and if you have a higher income. That's a very common form in British Columbia. We've had stuff like that for decades. I grew up in East Vancouver, very close to the project, as we called it. Back then, it was not, thank God, one of those enormous apartment buildings. It was actually single-story, 800,000 square foot units. Very comfortable places to grow up. That's a method of doing things that's been done for a long, long time. It works. It's not perfect, but from a legal perspective, the person living in the unit is a tenant, and instead of some private individual being the landowner, it's a nonprofit group that's the landowner, the unit owner. Again, still a situation where, as a tenant, you don't have control over what you're living in, and you don't have that sense of ownership, that long-term ability to commit, let alone the long-term commitment for many people, to the unit you're living in, or the neighborhood you're living in, or the building you're living in. And it's nice to see Fraser talk about commitment to a neighborhood or community, because we all have a commitment to this town, but many of us live in a certain part of town because we like being near the river, or we want to be near the grocery stores, or we want to be near downtown. Or we don't want to be near the river or downtown, we want to be up in Snob Hill where I live, because my kids can grow up in the mountains and I never see them after school. They just be off in the forest all day doing God knows what. But they come home when they're hungry, sometimes. That sense of community is very important. And none of these types of ownership can change that sense of community. You build what you want, you live where you want, so that you build a community there. In Vancouver, in the 1970s, just as I was leaving, cooperative housing exploded in Vancouver. It was a very, very big experiment in Vancouver, extremely successful in Vancouver. I have distant relatives who bought units in the 70s and 80s, and they still live in that community that they built with their friends who were members of the co-op together with them, and they love it. They're raising their kids there. In fact, one member of the family, Mom lives there, she's my age, her daughter lives there, and an ex-husband has a third unit as well. So it's very much a sense of family, very much a sense of community. How does a co-op work? Well, a co-op is like the credit union is. Members get together for a purpose of doing something, building housing. It costs money. You become an owner of the entire project with an emphasis that one day you will own this particular unit and therefore one share, 1/100th, 1/50th, depending on how big the project is, of the cooperative. The notion of cooperatives is that it's not one person who owns everything and therefore controls what's going on, and it's not whoever put in the most money of a group of people sets up what's going on. If you're a member, you have one vote out of 30 members, 50 members, 100 members, whatever the size of the cooperative. Even if your unit is worth more than somebody else's unit, even if it's bigger or better placed, you only have one vote. You think of the credit union, whether you have $50 on deposit or $50,000 on deposit, you only have one vote as a member of the credit union. Exactly the same idea. Unlike, say, the bank, where you do have more control if you own more shares in the bank. More control. In theory, you could have more control if you own more shares in the bank. So, cooperatives, strata, owned stratas. We have to look at who the owner of any rental housing is. Is it a not-for-profit group? Is it a private landlord? and then stratas generally, which become privately owned stratas. Those are some of the basic, and I've given you some very general outline, some of the basic methods of ownership there. As I said earlier, I'd be happy to answer questions later. I'll stick around even though I'm a little tired because I chased the 2.5-year-old all day. I think I can make it until 9 o'clock anyway. Thank you.
So our next two speakers are actually going to be with us tonight via the magic of technology. Both Dane Walters of Tim Hortons Golden and Marloes Venland of Day to Day Books. We're very happy to speak with us this evening about staff housing, employee housing, and both of them have very different experiences or are in sort of a different spot in their journey with employee housing and staff housing. So both of them agreed, since they couldn't be here this evening, that they would let us do a short little video of them. So both of them are about 5 minutes each. So we're going to just jump right into them. Both Dane and Marloes have a message for us. And
Hi, my name is Dane Walter, and I'm a new owner in Golden with Tim Hortons. We currently employ in the summer 60 to 70 people. In the winter, that'll drop down to 25 to 35. We've encountered quite a few challenges in staffing our business. I work very closely with online recruitment sites, and I have an immigration person who works pretty well solely for me on the Golden area. I have 2 restaurants in Edmonton, which I'm fortunate that I can transfer people from Edmonton down to Golden when needed. A couple of things that we've done a little differently is the housing is you know, it's a tough thing in Golden, so we purchased a property that would enable us to house quite a few more people, in the neighborhood of 14 to 16 people. We also purchased some mobile homes that are very close to our business, therefore the travel is minimal. Some of the other things we're doing with the housing, obviously the travel is a little bit restrictive to our team, so we're looking at, we're going to purchase a vehicle to make it a little easier for them to get around, to get to work, but also after working hours so that they can enjoy the area. Long term, we plan on being here quite a while, so we're looking that this will pay off long term by giving us an ability to keep people here for longer than just 6 months or a summer. We want to get people entrenched in the community and provide them a good opportunity to grow as people. And if we can keep them for 2 years, we think we're on the right track.
My name's Marloes Venland. I run Day to Day Books here in Golden. I've been operating for 4 years. Beside business owner in Golden, I'm on the board of the Chamber of Commerce. Because as a business owner and bookkeeper, I find it interesting to talk to other people and other businesses, and I find it important to be part of the business community and support each other and see where we can help grow together as a community. Beside the Chamber, I'm also treasurer for the Special Olympics team here in Golden, which is a really fun group as well to be part of and to share my knowledge as a bookkeeper to a small group like that. I've been running this business for 4 years now, I guess. 3 years with employees. It's been like like a bit of a roller coaster in that sense, that it's hard to find people that stay. I've got 2 very good employees now that are moved here last year from out of town, and they've been pretty much since then that they moved here struggling to find places to live, and especially the last few months it's been challenging for them, and adding some stress to myself as an employer, because you invest time in them to get them trained and up to speed, and when you find out that they are unhappy in their living situation, it definitely can affect the work situation as well. They are both in the rental market right now. One has a family of 5, which makes it more challenging as well to find suitable living space, not only affordable but also suitable in Golden. And from my own experience, the rental market has been going up and down, or like up and down. It's been going up, and it's been harder to find places. And for the same place that I was renting 2 years ago for $900. Now the rent is $1,400 or $1,500, and it's kind of like, why is it suddenly so much more expensive, which just doesn't make sense. And as an employer, I really try to I find it very important for my staff to have the right balance between work and life, which includes flexibility and hopefully a fair wage to make that work. And you hope as an employer that your employees can find a good place to live, so they are happy and find the right life balance. And if you hear them struggle, that's tough, and it adds stress as on the employer side as well, because you're as an employer, you spend time in training them and getting them up to speed. And if you have to worry that you have to go through that again, adds extra stress, and especially on a small business in a small community, it adds another level of concern that already that you have as a small business anyways.
So up next is someone you may recognize by now. That's me. I'm Jill Jutai, and I'm here today with Golden Community Social Services Co-op. The co-op is currently championing some of the background work to engage our community in conversation about affordable housing, providing mechanisms to connect people and projects, and ultimately being a catalyst to turn ideas into actions. Affordable housing is a topic we could spend the entire evening discussing, but we won't. This room is filled with as many different concepts of what affordable housing is as there are people present this evening. Some of you may instantly think about housing for people with low incomes, or in places in their lives where they may be vulnerable or in some sort of crisis. The term affordable housing is often confused with social housing, despite social housing being merely just one category of affordable housing. Affordable housing is actually a much broader term and includes housing provided by private, public, and not-for-profit sectors. It also includes temporary as well as permanent housing. In other words, the term affordable housing can refer to any part of the housing continuum, you can see up here, and that includes emergency shelters, transition housing, supportive housing, subsidized housing, market rentals, and market home ownership. In Canada, housing is considered affordable if it accounts for less than 30% of before-tax income, household income. As real estate prices soar and rental prices keep pace, how many people in our community are stretched beyond 30% of their income just to have a roof over their head? So the truth is, we all need affordable housing. Our friends and family members need it, our neighbors need it, our employees need it. Our community needs affordable housing. In addition to a dwelling we can afford, we also need homes that are adequate and appropriate. Homes that are free from health hazards, provide enough space for the people living in them, and provide longevity in our ability to stay in place. We all need a place to call home, where we can eat, sleep, have privacy, and feel safe. But what if we couldn't afford or find a place like I just described? How quickly does our physical and mental health start to suffer? How might it strain our personal relationships? What effect would this stressful home life have on our ability to go to work and to do a good job, to be someone who contributes to the community rather than takes from it. If only we all had an affordable, appropriate place to call home. It's time for us to start seeing housing as a basic human right, a universal concern. Now is the time to work towards being an inclusive community, not just one for the rich or for the lucky. Let's face it, without stable housing, our social fabric starts to fall apart, and that affects us all. But it's not all doom and gloom. Golden Area A is prime for diverse housing development. We are positioned to tackle our unique challenges of being a small, rural, emerging resort community with foresight, innovation, and a strong sense of community values. The housing crisis doesn't have to be a crisis in Golden. It can be a wake-up call, a call to action. We have the opportunity to rethink our concept of affordable housing, to innovate, and to design solutions that are uniquely Golden, to co-create the community we want to leave for our children and grandchildren. Now is the time to speak up, join the brainstorm, and be part of the action to bring affordable housing to Golden and to Area A. So join us in conversation, join us on the housing working group, set up a meeting, talk to your friends and family, talk to your neighbors, let's talk, and let's have some action. Thank you.
Anyways, thank you, Jill. It's interesting just seeing some of the points, and we were obviously all on the same page. Seeing the Tim Hortons and Marloes talk about housing, it's obviously been a major issue in all of our businesses. We've had many businesses where it's been a big issue for us too. Anyways, moving on, I just want to thank all of you guys that came out tonight. Thank you to Jill for hosting and planning this event. I think it's very well established in our community that affordable housing is a big issue throughout BC as well as many other Canadian cities. I'm not going to stand here and pretend that I'm an experienced builder. I've written a thesis statement on affordable housing, but I just wanted to speak a little bit about my experiences and share some thoughts on affordable housing in our community. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Raf Sumel. I didn't get into development on my own. This is a family project. My parents have been business owners in Golden for since they were 23. I think they bought the Ponderosa when they were about 23 years old. I was about 3 months. We moved into a one-bedroom apartment in behind the front desk. I lived there with my brother and sister, my parents, until I was about 4. And then they built a home wedged between the Ewans and the Dusevics from the bakery. And then I grew up on Selkirk Hill and on Pine Drive for the remainder of my time here in Golden while I was in high school. Obviously, a little list here. Parents have been around the block. We've owned a few businesses over the years. Making beds, bussing tables, that's what I grew up doing. Development is new to me. I'm figuring it out. So far it's been a little bit more of a goodwill gesture for the community than a business opportunity. I'm still feeling a little optimistic, but it's fine. Jump on the next slide there. So building the strata in Golden. I won't speak too much in depth about my experience in building a strata in Golden, but I will start off by saying that our plunge into the development world was correlated directly with a shortage of affordable housing in our community. About a year after owning the Best Western, we had, we felt like we had a good grasp and handle on the business, and it was time to hand it off to a general manager. So we went out looking for general managers. We had 2 come to Golden, and they both left. And we like to think it's not because we were horrible employers, but because they both stated that they just could not find any reasonable or affordable accommodation in Golden. And one left after 2 weeks of searching and the other one after a month. And these were jobs that were $75,000 to $100,000 with bonus type jobs. So not insignificant jobs in our community. So that's how we kind of got into this whole development thing. frustrated, I kind of joked to my mom and her family members. I said, if there's no housing available for these staff members, why don't we build something? So that kind of snowballed into Rocky Point. I clearly should have started my first building project or development project maybe with a garden shed, a single family home with a basement suite instead of a 2-phase 36-unit $10 million project. Probably bit off a lot more than I should have. Put the family farm on the line there a couple times. But yeah, it's been fun. What I will say about building a strata development in Golden is there are many challenges. Most importantly, for us, which was difficult, there hadn't been a multifamily development in Golden in over 25 years. And at the time that we were looking at developing this project, it seemed so obvious to us, and we couldn't understand why nobody had done it. But it became very obvious very quickly once we got our toes a little wet why nobody else had done this before. Firstly, the capital required is very significant. These are large projects, and a lot of the banks require as much as 75% pre-sales, which is very significant. We've sold 12 to 18 units so far, so we still haven't even hit that barrier. We're just fortunate to be in a position that we were able to make it work. Secondly, the cost of building in Golden is particularly high. That's something we're going to have to, I'm not sure what we're going to do to figure that one out, but it's definitely a challenge for us. We made it clear from the outset of our development to our contractor, it was kind of out of our hands, but we said, look, please, we're a small community, please engage and try your hardest to support local trades and businesses. And that was really important to us. That being said, as just kind of one example, doing business and building in Golden, one of our trade budgets was $185,000, and we were able to come on budget in that that line item with trades coming out of Calgary, and the closest local bid on that same project was $500,000. So there was a few times we said, $3,000, $4,000, $10,000 this way, that way. Let's try to support local, but at a $315,000 kind of line item for that one trade, we're unfortunately not able to keep that work local. So that's been a challenge and a little disappointing for us as long-term residents. We'd really love to have seen more work stay local. Thirdly, a major challenge is just the market in Golden quite isn't there yet. The market isn't quite willing to digest or absorb the units at that kind of mid 300 range where they really need to be to make it worth the developer's time. We're kind of seeing, Revelstoke seems to be at that sweet spot where they're seeing a lot of development, and Canmore's obviously the prices there are so crazy that developers can't find enough land to, turn into something. So that's another major challenge. Speaking to the development in Golden, there's been a few other surprises along the way. I'm not going to talk about the boring construction surprises. There's lots of those. We have those daily. But what I will say is out of the 18 units we built 15 two-bedroom units and 3 one-bedroom units. Felt like we did quite a bit of market research. Felt like it was pretty safe building 3 one-bedroom units and 15 two-bedroom units. It was about the 5th or 6th sale. We had sold 5 of our first, I think 5 or 6 sale was all to single professionals, and they all bought 2-bedroom units. And I started getting a little anxious and a little nervous, thinking, well, if all of the single people are buying 2-bedroom units, who are going to buy the 3 one-bedroom units? And I can say we've sold 12, and we still have 3 one-bedroom units available. So if anyone's looking for a 1-bedroom, we can have a chat after the meeting here today. But so that was very interesting, very surprising. Phase 2, we've kind of done. If we decide to proceed, we've gotten rid of those 1-bedrooms. That was really caught us off guard. That was quite surprisingly. Secondly, as a big surprise to us, kind of when we started the building, I thought 18 units, 5, 6 units, we'd sell to some locals who wanted to live into them. 5, 6 would go to Alberta, weekend vacation homes, skiing, biking. And then 5, 6 units would go to some locals, maybe some business owners or some more sophisticated, financially savvy locals who wanted to buy one. You know, there's obviously a huge housing shortage in Golden. In fact, we see a little bit of local demand there and locals picking up some units. And we haven't seen that, which has really caught us off guard too. For me, it seemed like a no-brainer that someone would throw a down payment and let it rent out and build some equity. And we haven't seen that, so that really caught us off guard too. I mean, we're all sitting in a room full of people who acknowledge that there's a huge housing shortage. So I was surprised not to see more support at a local level of people buying these units to rent them out. And then I got one last point here on challenges in building a strata where there were no analytics. I mentioned earlier that it was the first building built in 25 years. So one thing that was really hard for us when we were building kind of the business proposal was sitting there and digging through or trying to put some analytics together on, you know, where we should be priced, what these are going to cost. I mean, nobody had built anything in so long. It was hard to go up to a previous builder and say, hey, what was your square footage cost? What are some challenges we can anticipate? We're kind of jumping out of the airplane with a parachute there. And so that was really difficult too. And we've obviously figured that out in our first phase, and hopefully we can, you know, apply those lessons into the second phase if we end up going ahead there. But yeah, we'll just keep that slide there. I'll move on to my next little topic there, challenges in building affordable housing. When we decided to embark on this development journey, I spent days, maybe a few weeks, researching incentives and grant opportunities in building affordable housing. There was obviously at that time was a new government, and there was all this stuff all over the news at a federal level, provincial level, that there's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of funding for these type of projects. What I found in the very early stages of our project was that there is actually very little to zero grants for developers like ourselves, and the few that were there didn't really quite make sense and weren't worth exploring further. What I have found in the process of this development, and more so in preparing for this event, is that all the funding that seems to be available for nonprofits. It's not available for individuals like me, but there does seem to be quite a bit of funding there for the nonprofits. And I understand the logic and understanding the political issue of maybe the notion of subsidizing a developer in building. But the existing policy and structure right now, it makes it extremely difficult from what I can see to see smaller communities to capitalize on the grants and the programs that are available right now. The provincial and the federal government, they continue the message that there's all these funds that are being spent or will be spent in these public and private partnerships. What I've learned is these private partners are nonprofit organizations, not people like me. Sorry, one thing I kind of breezed over there was that from what I understand, what I see from the BC Housing website and bulletins are that they really not appeal, but they're really structured for very large communities and large nonprofit organizations. Going through the BC Housing website, it becomes very apparent fairly quickly that they want to be involved in big projects like this. And I think this could be a major obstacle for a small community like Golden. You know, these large nonprofit organizations in Vancouver, they have very large, diverse, educated, experienced board of directors. And more importantly is a lot of these nonprofits are very, very well funded. You know, I don't know anything about the Golden Services Co-op, but I have a feeling that some of these co-ops or these nonprofits in Vancouver have some, you know, big donors, and they're very well funded. One of the requirements for BC Housing, just kind of short and brief, is that a nonprofit needs to hold a piece of land free and clear title. So what that would mean is co-op or a nonprofit like the BC Services Co-op would need to own a parcel of land in Golden with no mortgage on it or a significant amount of equity, capital, cash in a bank. And that's, and I think that's going to be an obstacle we're going to see in our community. I'm not, that would probably correlate to a few $100,000. And I think in a small community like ours, it's quite significant. Yeah. Just a couple examples, I won't talk too much about these, but just to give you a little scale, Vancouver contributed approximately $40 million to purchase one of these projects, and then they lease it back to the nonprofit, I'm assuming for a very nominal fee. Another project here, they granted $2 million and then waived another $846,000 in development fees. And then finally, but not least, another one of these projects called Cedar Place in Burnaby is wholly owned, funded, developed, and operated by BC Housing. And I have a hard time seeing BC Housing coming into a small rural community like ours and taking on a project of any scale. I'll just take another slide there. So. Yeah, I think I think this is great, and I thank you, Jill, for bringing us together. I think right now is definitely the time for our community to come together, to be proactive, and as a resident, not as a housing scholar. Kind of, in my opinion, I see two real viable options here for our community to build some to come up with some solutions to some affordable housing. Number one is, I think, encourage development. Encouraging new development. This is something I've been passionate about for a long time. When GAI was here, it was something I talked about. We see some communities, like I think we can look within the province and some other communities what they're doing. We got Kelowna and Kamloops are offering developers a range of $2,000 to $8,000 grants per unit built. Kelowna is currently giving 10 years no property taxes to any new multifamily units. I mean, there's also communities waiving development fees. These are all things that spur development and encourage developers, make it that little bit easier to get into the ground and start building. One thing I like a good debate, but I feel that anybody here would have a really hard time arguing with me that if we had another 200-300 units in our community, that it wouldn't drive down the rental rates across the entire community, in turn making housing affordable for everyone. And just a point on what Jill said there, it's not only about subsidized housing, but affordability for all. I'm one of those slumlords that rent my ugly basement suite out for $1,100 or $1,200 a month. So, I know that another few hundred units, I'd probably have to push my rents down if I was competing against my own development for a rental. That being said, I think there's some. I'll stay on that last slide. But that being said, I think there's still some. We can come up with all the incentives in the world, but there's still, I think, a few challenges with that. Firstly, the economics. I touched on that earlier. These units, in my experience, from what we're doing over there at Rocky Point, the market really needs to still come up quite a bit. These units need to be selling in the mid-300s to really make any financial sense. And the market isn't quite there yet. Like I said, Revelstoke seems to be in the kind of a sweet spot there, and then Canmore's long past that. Secondly, availability of land. I feel like we lucked out. There was just this nice little parcel there that was, it was zoned and created for a multifamily, and it just seems to have worked out perfectly for our development. But I'm looking around the community, and I don't see a lot of other parcels of land that would appeal to me as a developer. Some of them are just a little too big. There's some by the river there that I think need a lot of infrastructure fill and things like that. But more than anything, one of the major barriers is these projects require huge capital, and there's very few community members in our community that have the financial ability to fund a large-scale development. And then there's the Braziers and ourselves that are the only ones really silly and dumb enough to get into the development world with no experience. So those are kind of the two major barriers. And then secondly, I think we just need to come together as a community. Or my second option here is we just need to be proactive. We somehow need to create or support a nonprofit organization and comply with the provincial and government funding requirements. We really need a person, maybe an individual, to spearhead a project like this. I'm looking around and Jill's kind of looks like she could be our captain of the boat here. But yeah, so I just want to finish off by just telling a really quick story here. Jill's obviously been in the community for some time. I just met her for the first time a few months ago. A few months ago, she came by Rocky Point and walked around, toured the property. And she shared with me an idea, and I'm just going to paraphrase our conversation real quick. We might have not said these exact words, but our conversation went something like this. She started off by sharing this idea of buying a couple units in maybe our development and maybe another development. And she said that, I'm not sure if this was her idea, but I think it's a great idea. She said that, she said that it would eliminate the risk from a small nonprofit getting into the development game, which now with my experience, I would be cautious of that. I understand how that could be risky. She also said that it would encourage developers. I mean, I was extremely encouraged when she said she wanted to possibly purchase on behalf of a few units. But most importantly, what she said next was really kind of stuck with me since then, and we haven't talked about this, but I think about it all the time. She said, imagine, it would kind of eliminate the stigma of living in low-income housing, and I never really thought about that. She said, and when we got to talking, when you across the street, we have a low-income housing project, and when you're driving into that project, when you go into someone's house, immediately pulling into that housing project that they're either a low-income individual or they have a disability of some nature, and that's why they're in that project, and they're automatically stigmatized within our community. And imagine somebody lived in a beautiful building like yours. She might not have said beautiful, but she said, imagine somebody lived in a beautiful building like yours and be living among the other community members, and somebody would come into that space and they'd say, wow, this is such a beautiful place to live. And I think that would empower the tenants instead of stigmatizing them. And I think that was a great idea. It's a great concept. And I think that ideas like that, those outside of the box ideas, are what is going to bring our community, bring options and solutions to the affordability, housing affordability to our town. And I thought that was a great idea. And so, just finishing up, Jill, thank you so much for having me here, and thank you for allowing me to be part of the discussion on this important issue in our community.
All right, thanks so much, Rav. And yes, that conversation did happen. So, up next, some of you might have looked around the room and wondering if I'm off on a tangent right now. I am going to introduce Ned Johnson. Ned is a managing partner with Innovation Building Group and Vidor Developments, who are focused on creating energy-efficient and sustainable single and multi-family homes. Ned was really excited to speak to us tonight about why rental housing development in Golden is so important, and why sustainable housing development designs and practices are important and very achievable.
Hi there, my name's Ned Johnson. I'm a founding partner in Innovation Building Group and Vidor Developments. We design and build sustainable single and multifamily homes in Golden, Whistler, and Pemberton. We recently finished a 45-unit apartment building in Pemberton called Radius, and a 20-unit condo building in Whistler called Solana. Orion, a 45-unit condo building, is currently under construction in Pemberton as we speak. In Golden, we are planning to break ground in the spring of 2019 on a 48-unit condo apartment building with 15,000 square feet of commercial space located on the old glacier rafting lot. Radius, Solana, and Orion, as well as Oso, are or will be built to net zero ready standards, meaning that the buildings produce as much energy as they use with the addition of solar power. Today, I would like to talk about why rental housing development is important to Golden and why sustainable housing development designs and practices should be a critical part of housing development. So why is rental housing development important to Golden? In Canada today, for the first time in more than 50 years, demand for rental housing is outpacing home ownership. We all have personal stories about the shortage of quality housing available for rent in Golden. The low supply of rental housing is hurting our chances to grow as a community and, in short, making housing more expensive. Simply put, we need more quality housing. Why sustainable building designs and practices are important. Home ownership used to be a family's main goal. Taking pride in your home played a big part in being a homeowner. Rental housing was often thought of as a transitional period in one's life, not a long-term goal. With rental housing now outpacing ownership, we need to create rental homes that families will be proud to live in long-term. Essentially, what we need to do is we need to make the rental a home. Most people would like to live a more sustainable lifestyle. To accomplish this, the homes we live in need to make sustainability easier and not more difficult. Building more sustainable and efficient rental homes will make people proud of where they live, and one of the many fantastic byproducts of building efficiently is living in comfortable spaces with no temperature swings, no drafts from leaky windows and walls, and overall improved comfort. Another benefit of building sustainable housing will be the stabilization of housing costs, thus creating more affordable living. Building sustainably reduces environmental impacts during the building process and in the day-to-day operation of the home once complete. All these factors lead to reduced costs for home ownership in the future. Contrary to popular beliefs, building more efficient homes does not need to cost more. It is more about a collaborative design process, material selection, and paying attention to the details. High-quality building envelopes, in simple terms, consist of collaborative design, lots of insulation, no thermal bridging, good quality, well-placed triple-pane windows, no drafts, fresh air, and simple mechanical systems. A typical design process versus the collaborative design process. A typical design process would be when the architect prepares drawings for a client, the client submits drawings for the permit, the client hires a builder, the builder hires trades for various tasks. There is very little collaboration in this process. What I would suggest is the collaborative design process. This has a goal to improve energy efficiency in a building from the early stages. Collaboration of the client, builder, architect, consultants, and contractors starts at the beginning of the project. Energy modeling is a very useful and necessary tool at this time for exploring the various factors of the overall energy efficiency as well as construction costs. Rarely do all the players get together at the early stages of a project. Not getting together and collaborating in the early stages will create unnecessary inefficiencies in any building project. Insulation and thermal bridging. Thermal bridging accounts for a 20 to 30% loss in the effectiveness of insulation by transferring heat through the wall assemblies. This can be resolved by using what is called exo-insulation. This is where you apply the insulation on the outside of your frame building, creating the same comfort as putting on a down jacket. This method of insulation is not necessarily more expensive, it's just a different procedure. Triple pane windows. They used to be twice the cost of double pane windows. You can now find triple pane windows that are only 5 to 7% more in cost. Considering the heat loss from windows, this is a smart place to invest your money. Window placement. Most builders attach windows from the outside where the heat loss is the worst around the window frame. Windows should be installed recessed halfway into your insulation to provide the most insulation efficiency. This is not harder to do, it is just a different detail. OSO, which is the building we're going to be building in Golden next year, is designed with 2 buildings over the commercial space with a courtyard between them. This creates more corner units, which gives them more windows and more natural light. This in turn will create passive solar heat gain, provide a bright, healthy environment with less reliance on indoor lights. Installing taller windows higher in the walls will also provide more natural light. Drafts. I prefer the term draft-free over airtight, as airtight implies stale air. Draft-free construction creates comfort. Nobody feels cozy in a home with drafts. Comfort equals increased efficiency. Increased efficiency equals less fuel consumption. And less fuel consumption equals lower heating bills, which all adds to more sustainable living. Fresh air and simple mechanical systems. In all our projects, we include a heat return ventilator, which is also known as an HRV. Fresh air is drawn into the HRV and passes by the warm exhaust air where it is warmed and distributed to the home. The HRV is to run 24/7. The model we use runs at 90% efficiency compared to most that run at 50 to 60% efficiency. Our unit does not necessarily cost more, it's just a matter of finding the right one that fits your circumstances. Our HRVs are designed to work based on the number of occupants in a space, not solely on volume. More people, more fresh air. Heating. Sun Pump is a Canadian company that has created a system that operates as a simple heat pump at night, but during the day it utilizes the sun to provide hot water for space heating, domestic hot water, and air conditioning. This is a similar concept to GeoExchange, but using heat pumps and solar. Pumps circulate refrigerant that boils at minus 50 degrees Celsius, which is 150 degrees Celsius better than water. Simply put, for every watt of electricity we use, we will get a larger number of watts from the sun during the day. Sun Pump also harvests solar in all types of weather, so it is ideal for Golden. Rainwater harvesting. In our buildings, we utilize drainage from the roof and direct it to storage tanks, then use a drip irrigation system for the community garden. In summary, it takes more than energy efficiency to lead a more sustainable lifestyle. As a real-life example, OSO, speaking of OSO will address the following. Healthy living, with fresh air continuously supplied to living spaces, draft-free walls, and lots of natural light through efficient windows. A reduction in resource use. Net zero, ready construction saves on resources. Maintenance. We select durable materials that will not require a lot of maintenance over their lifespan. Again, saving on resources. Recreation. Access to food. Access to food. If you want to grow your food, you need to live on a property or have access to a community garden. OSO will have a community garden available to tenants. We will have gardening tools available in the workshop so that each person does not need their own personal tools. The gardens will be perfect for seniors and families with young kids. We will encourage planters on the decks. Recreation. Recreation is one of the reasons we live here. OSO is in the center of it all. Location. Location, this may be OSO's most sustainable feature. With the bike storage and workshop, you will be able to ride directly from home to the trails or work. A bike, car, dog wash station will be on site so you can clean up after going home and put a clean bike ready for the next ride. Dogs and cats are part of the family at OSO as well. A shared ski tuning bench in the shop will make it easy to always have perfect skis. Town and trail systems are a short walk from your door. The location is all about walkability. If it is close, safe, and pleasant, people will walk. Transportation. Being able to live without a car is another way OSO will be a more affordable living option. OSO plans to have a car share program. We will provide 2 electric cars with charging stations. The power will come from the rooftop solar panels, so they will truly be clean and run on our own renewable energy. This program will be open to all of Golden and will encourage a mostly car-free lifestyle. The car-free lifestyle will help to energize the downtown with people while not putting more pressure on parking. Our goal is to create homes for people, not homes for cars. Over the long term, all of these points will help to control the cost of housing. Stable housing costs are essential for long-term housing affordability and peace of mind for tenants and all homeowners. Thank you very much.
We are still accepting volunteers to participate in the housing working group. So those of you who love meetings and love getting things done, I highly recommend that you sign up. We have some really great community members who have already stepped up, but they would love some of you that are here tonight to join. And again, thank you so much for coming out.